Tuesday. Welcome back to Step Into the Story and today's featured author segment. I'm Donna Jones-Allward. I'm here with my bestie and co-host, Barbara Tanner Wallace. And we're both pleased to welcome our special guest today, Susanna Kearsley.
Yay! So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So how are you?
I am doing really great. Thank you. How are you guys doing? How did everything go down in Nova Scotia?
It was certainly no Fiona like last year. So we ended up with, there's some trees down in the neighborhood and we lost a bunch of branches and I think like one maple sort of down in behind.
Yeah.
But we lost power for the day, but it was back on that night. So it wasn't. Now, I guess yesterday, Monday, there was still power outages in like Lunenburg and stuff. So we didn't get it so badly, but other places got it worse.
I know, like St. Andrews got it really hard.
Yeah, and St. John up through there.
Yeah, I have a friend that I know from online, and she's out by must be Newfoundland, Green Gables area.
Yeah.
She said they got nailed.
Oh, and PEI?
Yeah.
Well,
but I think it was storm surge stuff, and she said they just got nailed.
Yeah. The storm surge, I think, was perhaps the worst sort of here. But I think the winds and stuff up along St. John, up along the Fundy Coast, was pretty. It was pretty nasty. Well, so nothing like that where you are, right?
No, not yet. Hey. We are we're tangentially like Tornado Alley-ish, So we don't get too cocky out here, because you can get a lot of weird storms. We had some crazy thunderstorms last week, but nothing like on the coast. So yeah.
You know what? With the global weather kind of thing happening, it's like no one is safe.
No,
it's true.
No.
Yeah. So we're really here to
weather segment.
We're really here to talk to you about The Vanished Days, which Barb and I both recently read. And there's the cover. It's so beautiful.
Isn't it pretty?
It is pretty.
Doesn't it just make you want to
really does amazing
jump on a plane and go to the Highlands? Seriously.
It does make you want to go to the Highlands.
Yeah. But I wanted to grab a few things about you from your website because I went over and paid a little visit.
Okay.
So there's an official bio which says that, New York Times, USA Today, and Global Mail bestselling author Susanna Kearsley is a former museum curator who loves restoring the lost voices of real people to the page, often in twin-stranded stories that interweave present and past.
Yep.
Her award-winning novels are published in translation in more than 25 countries, and she lives near Toronto. And that's really official and great if you're going to introduce you. But you also have this personal, sort of casual kind of bio on your page as well. That's really, really interesting. So this is the part that I really loved. So it says, I can't remember when I began to put words on paper myself, but I remember being 7, reading Little Women and recognizing pieces of myself in the character of Jo. By then I was already writing first chapters and I wrote continually through my teenage years. After studying politics and international development at university, I sidestepped into museum work and at the age of 22 became a curator. In that same year, my sister dared me to stop writing first chapters and produce a book. I'd never been able to resist a dare. By the end of that summer, I'd finished my first novel and I was hooked. My hobby had become a vocation. So what I really loved about that was I too had a sister who gave me a kick in the butt. After years of
thing to have somebody, isn't it?
And I think most of us, if you talk to most writers, it's like, when did you become a writer? And they're like, when I first grabbed a pencil or whatever, and
when you're a kid.
Yeah, but there was a point where my sister was like, stop complaining, just go write a book, and I did, and that first book was crap. But I was really hooked on the process. So that just really resonated with me. And I also, I loved that you made, like, the word vocation seemed a very deliberate choice as opposed to a job or a career.
I think, like, for anybody that writes, it's so hard to explain to somebody what it is. Like, because everybody else that's my age, like I'm 57, right? So everybody else that's my age is like, oh, so many more years to retirement. And I'm like, retirement.
Right.
Like writers just like, I want to go out, like, I want to go out with a pen in my hand, having just written the end, right? Like
right.
Or finished revisions, probably finished revisions. You don't
right.
want some
right.
But the idea of retiring is something that doesn't even occur to me. Why would you want to retire? It's such a wonderful thing to do. It's such a wonderful way to spend your life.
And can you imagine not like what you would be like if you weren't creating something?
I can't not. I forget who said this. I want to kind of say, for some reason, I think Morley Callahan, but I don't think it's Morley Callahan. It's somebody like that who said that, that there's a thing about the writer, and is that they're always watching. It's a trick of the mind, and you're born with it. And I think there are so many things that you are born with as a writer. It's not that you can't teach bits and parts of writing. It's not that writing isn't a craft that can be learned and taught, because then, it's not some, mystical, magical thing. You are a writer because you process life through words. You process it that way. Just as my friends who are painters or photographers, that's how they process life. That's how they process what's happening to them at whatever stage of their life they reach for their camera, or they reach for their paint box, or they write a poem, or that's what you do when you have this kind of makeup. And my way of doing stuff is to write it out. Like when I was in my teenage angsty years, I wrote lyrics, I wrote poems, I wrote small stories.
Girl, same.
Yeah, right?
All that angsty teenage poetry.
I've got a box of angsty teenage poetry, and it's just, but that's how you process it, right? That's because it's the only way I know to process what's going on in my life. And that's why, if you know a writer and you read their books, only that writer could have written that story. Only that writer could have written that character. And you know where they're pulling all that inspiration from. You know what they were going through at that point in their life, whether they were, going through difficult times in their relationship, whether their children were at a certain stage, where they draw that from. One of the most interesting things is reading Agatha Christie's autobiography and seeing how, because then you can spot her characters, like, oh, well, that's Mr. Satterthwaite, that's where she drew this person from, or that's where she, became interested in this. And that's it. Only she could have written those stories. And sometimes for me, that's why when people, continue other people's stories, it never really works for me. It never rings true.
It's never quite the same.
Because you can't draw from that. You're not that person. Right. So
Barb and I were talking the other day about something, and we were saying that we're more storytellers than, I think we were talking about academia, and just saying that. Yeah.
I think we were also talking about that. A lot of writers, what we do is very organic.
Yep.
And it's not that you can't teach writing, because I know some great teachers, but then I have trouble putting it into words, and it's because this is how you do it.
Same.
And so tricky. It's so tricky. Yeah, I know. It can be interesting when you do, like when I go to the Surrey International Writers Conference every year, and I have to, come up with this is my session for the year, or my 2 sessions for the year, and then, someone says, "Oh, tell us how you do this, or tell us how you do that, or tell us how you do dual time." And you have to really sit and think about, well, how do I do it? Because sometimes you don't actually know yourself, but you can pull out the craft elements. But as far as being able to say, well, I've never been one of those, like, here's the 3-act structure, and here's the this, and here's the that, because the book just shapes itself. Not that there's anything wrong with 3-act structure. There's something, the 3-act structure exists because storytelling kind of tends to organically fall into 3-act structure anyway. Like if you look at your own books, you can probably draw lines where those things, those beats will hit. But that doesn't mean you sit down with that structure to start off with.
No, sometimes it's just instinctive.
It is. I'll love telling the story. There was a baseball team years ago that hired Ted Williams as a coach, figuring who better to teach batting than the greatest baseball player of all time. And what they found is he would be going, "Why didn't you swing to that?" And they're like, "Well, why would you?" And he goes, because it was a good pitch, but he could never articulate
why it was
why he knew it was a good pitch. He's like, because it's in your wheel. Like he just kept saying general things.
That was it. That was the pitch. Yeah, it's because it's just you can't. Some things you can't teach, and the watching is one of them. Don't you find the watching, like when you spend time with people that don't write? You know, like if you've been in a restaurant or something, we will have seen 101 things going on in that restaurant that people who aren't writers will have completely missed. We'll have seen conversations going on off to the side. We'll have watched, like, you know, different people coming in and going out and think, that's going on, or this is going on. These little human interactions. Being a waitress, I waitressed for years. Being a waitress was fascinating because you could see all these like, interpersonal interactions going on that other people would just completely miss because it was subtle. And, you know, I think it just comes, it's just your brain. It's what you notice and you don't, you know, other people don't. But then again, it's not mystical magical, because I just took my car in to the garage yesterday and the mechanic, you know, can listen to my car and go, oh yeah, water pump, you know, like I can't do that. I don't know what it is, right? Yeah. So everybody's got their thing. We just happen to have that thing. Which...
It's so it looks like Sue Slade just got home from work. I think she's home early, and she said we can't keep Susanna's books on our shelves. That doesn't surprise me. She's the manager at the Dartmouth Book Exchange.
Oh, hey, Sue. Yep.
Yeah. So
we love Sue.
Yeah, we do.
Very nice. She's a huge author champion.
As I was browsing through your site, I saw the Flaubert quote that you have, and it is, talent is nothing but long patience. And boy, So my question is, how long did you write between that time when you stopped writing first chapters and then winning the Catherine Cookson Prize?
Okay, so I finished the first book. It was actually remarkably short. So, but long patience applies to your entire career. So and you know, and for those of you who are just, you know, starting out, or who are, and everybody has their own, it's a long game. Writing is a long game.
Yep.
I finished writing that book, I believe I think it was around 1989, 1990, something like that, 1988, I think. And I sold it. I finished it. I sent it out. It got rejection. I sold it in 1993. So no, it would have had to be before that, because I'd given myself 5 years to be published, and I sold it in like 2.5. So it would have had to be 1990 when I finished it. So I sold it in January of 1993. Right? Does that make sense?
So you were in your 20s.
Yeah, you were young.
Young. I was a baby.
We were late bloomers, Barb?
No, I was. That happens with a lot of women. Like, right? It happens with a lot of women.
We're kind of tied up with the whole child rearing thing. It's
if it makes you feel better, P.D. James. You know, I will. Let me just pick up that name that I dropped. P.D. James. She was at one of the Canadian Book Expo things that I was at with one of my first publishers, the Random House here in Canada, and I ended up getting sat beside her for a signing. She was so lovely. I was pregnant with my firstborn at the time, and she was so amazing. And I was really worried about how having a child was going to affect my writing, because I was an old, mother for the time. I was like in my early 30s, and she was like, oh, she said, most of us, don't start writing until after our children are grown up and everything. She said, you'll be fine. Everything will be, don't worry about it. Women, we can write through anything. And then I later learned about her life, and I thought, if she can do what she did, read about her, read her biography, like her little Wikipedia biography sometime. If she can do what she did, we can do anything, so it's, but
pretty good career there.
Most women don't get to finish their first book until their families are grown and out of the house. Yeah. It's not something that they have the chance to do. So I was very fortunate. But yeah, I was in my late 20s, my mid to late 20s when I first got published. And, I've been, 93 was when I learned I'd won the Cookson Prize, and 94 was when I first got published. Yeah.
So talking about the vanished days, because we wanted to talk about this. Partly, what I was curious about is this is a prequel to the Winter Sea and Firebird.
It's a companion book, sort of prequel companion.
Okay.
So part of the action takes place at the same time as the Winter Sea,
right,
with the same characters, and part of it goes back before it. And it's dual time, but there's no modern day.
Right. And it's about the Jacobean period, which was a nice, refreshing read after we've been doing 20th century books for several months now.
Yeah,
and it was like a breath of fresh air to go back to the 18th century. But what those two books have been out for over a decade now. So what made you go back to the Graham family after all these years?
I've never left the.
Oh, you never left? Okay.
I've never left the Murrays and the Grahams. Yeah, the Grahams and the Murrays are sort of my little private obsession. They're partly because once you get into the papers and everything of a family, there are infinite possibilities of the lines to follow, and partly also because I really like the people. I like the modern day people as well. I have since been befriended by the descendants of both families, and they have helped me with my research. They're really, really wonderful. So it's just I just really like writing about them. They were present for a lot of the big episodes of that part of the Jacobite movement, and they should be on the page more, but they're not. So I have this sort of personal, I don't know what you call it. It's like I just feel like I need to put them back on the page. I feel like they deserve it. The more I learn about these people, the men and the women, the more I feel that they really deserve to be back on the pages, and their voices need to be restored to the historical record. And anything I can do towards that is just sort of like it's a vocation. It's my life's calling, and at this stage, when I am able to do it, I do. And so I've probably got at least, I know I've got at least 2 more books with the Murrays and Grahams. It's just a matter of whether they're the ones that come next, or whether I intersperse it with something else, like whether my readers are wanting to follow that family more, or whether my readers need a break from that family, or what, I don't know. It's hard to tell with readers whether they're just like, oh my God, not more Jacobites. But it's very hard to let go of them.
Yeah. No, you talked about the research, and that actually kind of feeds into a question I had, because the English-Scottish politics are incredibly complicated. We're talking centuries of back and forth and back and forth. Yeah. So clearly I was so impressed with how detailed, and it's like, this woman knows her history. It's like, you really are so immersed in it. So I'm curious how much, it's very political. So how did you balance having to do narrative versus facts, kept that balance so that you kept the story, because we didn't lose the pacing, yet we had to you had to know all this complicated things and all this the complicated mechanisms going in place for the narrative.
Well, so there are probably some people that would disagree with you. There are probably some people that would be like, oh my God, there was too much history in that. That was a tricky one. The Vanished Days was a tricky one because it came so early in the line of things. And you don't have to, have read The Winter Sea or The Firebird to read The Vanished Days, and vice versa. You don't have to read any of the other ones to read the others. But the complicated nature of the politics of that particular time period, the 1680s, 1690s, when the Jacobite
when you're in Lily's point of view.
Yeah, when you're in Lily's point of view, there's so much going on, and you can't. It's really tricky to simplify it down, because you can't just say Protestants and Catholics, because it wasn't just Protestants and Catholics. You've got
because there's so many different sects of Protestants.
You've got Episcopalians and Presbyterians and Catholics, and and I always feel I have to do justice to King James VII, because he really gets a raw deal in history, and if you talk to the people that actually, if you talk to the people that actually knew him, no, if you read the letters of the people that actually knew him and interacted with him, even the people that were his opponents, they're much more fair to him than later English historians were. So I always try to go back to the primary sources of the day and get his own words on the page as much as I can, because he was a very, very interesting man. Right down to allowing people, the thing that really did him in was he passed a bill allowing religious freedom for everybody, including Jewish people. And, everybody in England was, well, we can't be having that, out you go sort of thing. Like, yeah. He was very much ahead of his time in a lot of ways. You try to create a sense of just how crazy it was at the time when he came in. And it's tricky because when you know all this stuff, you're like, oh, I could put that in, I could put this in, I could put this in, but then that's like a block to the story. Nobody but me is interested in that. And you have to try to find what is the purpose of the scene. What are we doing in this scene? What is the thread that we're pulling through?
Right.
And do we really need to know all this stuff? Do we really need to know all that? And I maybe put a little bit more in the Vanished Days than I would have put in the other books, because I figured Vanished Days is almost like an anchor for the Jacobite series. So
bring up some of the
people can go back to it again, and if they don't understand what's going on, go back to the Vanished Days, read it, figure out how it all started, and then come back. But it was tricky with the one I'm doing now, which is set 100 years earlier. I'm purposely like hauling out a lot of the history and just raking it back out again, because I'll put stuff in and it's kind of like, yeah, I really like that. That's really interesting. But, it's not this guy's book. It's the couple's book. And I just have to move them in front of the history and let the history go past, so every book is different. You just have to figure out what the balance for that book is, and how much history is needed because what I don't want the reader to have to do is to stop in the middle and go, I don't understand. I don't know what's going on. I try to throw information in for the reader, so the reader will not have to go look it up themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Because you can't assume that a reader even knows what a Jacobite is.
Right.
Then you have to figure out a way to put that in naturally with people that all know what a Jacobite is,
right.
And have them talk about it in a way that isn't an as you know, Bob, right?
Right. As you know, Bob.
We were just talking about that this morning, the using dialogue as a narrative dump.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And who they're talking to, right? Because it's often what I'll do is have an older person talking to a child, because children don't understand
right
in the same way. So it's kind of like, well, this is why we call ourselves Jacobites. This is why we do this. This is why we do that. Because it's easy when you're doing dual time with modern day historical.
Sure.
But when you're doing everybody in the same time period, it's like, well, we already know that. Why are you telling us what a Jacobite is? We know,
That's a good point.
Right.
One of our people, by the way, one of the commenters just wanted to know that they love the shadowy horses.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's the woman who helped me with that. Margaret McGovern, who was my bed and breakfast owner, is still a very dear friend of mine in Eyemouth. So she checks all of Robbie's, whenever I use Robbie McMorran, who was the little boy in the Shadowy Horses who came back to be the hero of the Firebird. She checks all of Robbie's speech for me, because he's very Eyemouth. It's a very distinct dialect. So Margaret is just a lovely person, and she makes me awesome shortbread too.
Nice.
So, yeah.
One of the things I really liked about this, right at the beginning, is the choices you made for point of view and how that was constructed throughout. So, it's very much, Adam's point of view is very much like, come into the pub, sit down, grab a pint, let me tell you a story. You know what I mean? It just had that intimate quality in the way that you've set it up. And then we go into the somewhat recent past of Lily's life, so the two converged at the end. And we go on this journey with her, and she's just young at the time. And so those 2 points of view were completely unique. And so I think my question, it's kind of a two-part question.
Yep.
Did you ever have trouble switching between the two? And did you write the timelines like one at a time? Or did you do it linearly so you alternated when it was required?
Okay. I never had trouble switching, and I wrote linearly. I tend to write linearly, except I also, I'm actually doing this at Surrey. I write kind of like in puzzle pieces. I will get scenes that come ahead in the book, and I write like it's like when you're piecing a puzzle out, and you
Yep.
you have like this is the roof of a house, but I don't know where it's going to go. It's going to go over here somewhere. So I have. I can actually show and tell you. Here, this is my binder for the book that I'm writing now. So what I will actually have is something like this is completely full, but I have something that says like the adder scene. Okay, so I see the entire adder scene play out, and I write it down. I don't know where it's going to go.
Okay.
But when I get there, then it's all sort of,
Yep.
The christening, I think it's going to be like this, so and then I am smart enough to put everything in here so that I don't lose it. Right. And that quite often I also get, you get it on you guys probably do, right? So it's whatever paper you have to hand.
Yep.
So on there and you put it in there. So, but as for the voices, like Adam's voice was kind of like the, Treasure Island-y type stuff, right? Like, the books I used to read when I was a kid, Tarzan, Treasure Island, I think Tarzan is like, I had this story from one who had no business telling it to me. That type of, and Treasure Island begins with that same kind of, Robert Louis Stevenson did that a lot, like the Squire Gordon and the others have persuaded me to tell you the story. That sort of that idea that, oh goody, I get to come sit, exactly that, I get to come sit by the fire and you're going to tell me this wonderful story. And I loved that as a kid. I loved that feeling of being like under the covers with my blanket for the whole day, reading this story of somebody.
It's very intimate
that happened to them, and then you're in and out of it all the time. And I loved that. So I guess it's a very natural storytelling voice, really, when you think about it, because that's how people tell stories. Let me tell you what happened to me when I was a child. Let me tell you what happened to me when I was this.
Yeah. And do I have a story for you?
That's how we tell stories to our kids. It's how we tell stories to our friends, right? Well, I remember once when this happened. That's how we tell stories. And but no, Adam's voice was always very. I hear the voices, and I don't see them while they're talking. I'm on their shoulder, kind of, so I'm in their viewpoint. But I hear their voices. That's why I always find it really, really hard to do readings, when people want you to do readings, because it's like, well, I don't sound like a 35-year-old Scottish man. No, I can't read Adam, I can't, but
I really loved him because he came across as so smart and that you couldn't fool him.
No, he's pretty
and I
sad.
loved that about him. But
I love the characters.
I love him.
I love the characters that come in and you think they're going to come in a certain way and they don't. That's my favorite ones. Like the one that Henry. I see Henry, but I had seen young Henry in my head. So I'd seen Henry as he was when Lily knew him, and I'd seen this really happy, happy-go-lucky Henry. And the first time that Adam and Gilroy went down to visit Henry and Henry opened the door, I'm like, this is really cool. Who is this guy that's like really, canny and cagey, and what the heck is this? What the heck is this scene taking me into? And, because I meet them just like people at a party when they start coming on the page, and their voices, like it's hard to describe again, but you guys probably experience it too. They reveal themselves to you, and then they say something and you're like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that about you. That's really neat.
I love it when I'm surprised by my characters.
Yeah. Yep.
So speaking of surprises, without giving anything away, because we try to stay spoilery free.
Good luck.
There is a massive twist in the end.
A little bit.
Totally wasn't expecting.
Queen of understatement, a little bit. Did you always know that was how the book was going to end, or like, so did you plot that part? Because it sounds
I knew who was who.
Okay, because
I knew who was who. Yes.
Because it sounds like you do a lot organically, where you have some tent poles, but then you let your characters guide you through and that kind of thing. So I was wondering if you plotted that beforehand, or if that was one of those, oh, surprise, and then adjusted everything to.
I knew who was who. It was very tricky to do because I also knew I didn't want the person involved to lie. So it's very tricky to do that without lying. And if you go back through and look at it very carefully, you'll notice that the person involved never introduces themselves. Somebody else always inroduces them. And
one of the things I loved about it was it seemed like it came out of left field, but then when you thought back, you're like, no, it didn't.
There are all these little breadcrumbs.
You just didn't put them together because it's just not what you were thinking. It was great.
You have to do the sleight of hand early, and you have to do it hard so that the reader buys into that and never questions you again, right? Yeah. So it's and then the reader will be like, no. And it was it took a bit of revision, a bit of work to do.
Sure.
And there's still some people that didn't catch a couple of things, or have questioned a couple of things. And once you explain it to them, they're like, oh yeah, okay, I see it then. But I always feel that if you have to explain it, you probably haven't done your job really well. So I don't know. It's
well, yes and no. I mean, it is a really complex book. So, I mean, it's understandable that, perhaps when they're reading a certain part, they get distracted by something and they just miss a little something,
There's one moment where Lily says something to somebody, like says someone's name to somebody, and they think she's talking to one person and she's actually talking to another in sort of like a, hey, look there sort of way. And everybody gets that right.
You know what? I know what scene it was because
everybody gets it. If I were just to say like, hey, Barbara, look there, it clears the whole thing up for people. But nobody catches it. Like nobody is at the moment. But
yeah.
But I got a plot twist of my own because one of the characters that I had no idea who he was, I just thought he was an ordinary character who just walked onto the page, ended up being like the son of two characters out of one of my earlier books that I didn't even realize until I finished the book. Yeah.
And I ended up really liking him too.
I loved him. I got like sort of like 3/4 of the way through the book and I went, oh crap, I know who you are. And then I had to sort of like figure out, because I was literally going through like the first 2/3 going, like saying his last name, going, that's a really familiar last name. Why do I know that last name? Have I given it to somebody before for something? And he was just going along and I thought, oh, I know exactly who he is. I know exactly who he is now. He just wandered into the book. And I love when that happens. I love when that happens.
I like it I like surprises, because that's when, to me, sometimes that's when the biggest story magic happens.
Yeah.
I like to be able to, and I think that's why I'm not a huge pantser, is because I like to leave room for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, not a huge plotter, you mean? Yeah, because pants
more so in my historicals now I'm finding than I was with straight up romance, but no, I still like a lot of organic and surprises.
I think you do a mix. Like I don't plot. I know sort of what points I want to hit. If that, like I have my historical timeline and I know what would make good scenes. Whether my characters want to do that or not is like, they usually don't. And I don't like to get tied into thinking that I have to hit that scene, because a lot of the time if I'm thinking, okay, well, they have to go to this place and do this thing, and then I get too into that with my head, and my characters are like, actually, no, we don't even need to go to that town. We can skip down here and do this entire thing down here. That's much more fun. If I'm forcing them to go somewhere, it always makes the story worse. Always invariably makes the story worse and wastes my time. So I'm much better off just kind of sitting back and I'm panicking now because I have a deadline at the end. Like my book has to be handed in on September 30th, which is why I'm rocking the Norman Reedus bangs right now, right? Because I've got a big cup of coffee. I've got I'm just doing, I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm drinking coffee, I'm writing everything. And when I get to this stage, I always make the mistake of trying to calm myself down by point forming what my characters need to do. It's like, it's okay, it's fine. All they have to do is this and this and this and this. And I think I've got it under control because I'm an engineer's daughter. We make lists. This is what we do. This is how we get our lives under control. But what I always forget to remind myself is that by doing that, I'm forcing my characters to go places that they might not need to go, right? They're, I might not even have to write half that stuff that I've just listed, and the book will be just fine, so I just need to chill and relax and drink wine instead of this, and the book will be fine, so.
I was going to say, well, if it helps you, we have two comments. One is that Sue said that she loves plot twists, so she's bumping Vanishing Days up to the top of her reading pile. And then someone else said, I read Mariana years ago and loved it, so I started collecting her other books, and I'm moving them all up the list now.
Oh, thank you. Mariana was my sister's favorite book. So
I have one last question. Well, actually, I mushed them together. It's really a bunch of questions, but since it's mine, I can say one.
Okay.
When is your next book out? What is it about? And are you going to be going back to supernatural elements? Because I know that this book was surprisingly non-supernatural.
Yeah, well, you can't throw everything in all at once. Like I read somewhere, I don't know if this is helpful for anybody, but I read somewhere that, when you're dealing with, I don't like using the word brand because brand is so, I don't know, brand just never seems right to me. But when you sort of create a style that people expect from you, one thing you can do is try to figure out what 5 elements you sort of tend to always include, right? Or it doesn't have to, pick the elements you tend to always include. And if you're going to change anything, maybe obviously don't change them all at once. But maybe try to keep 4 or at least 3 at a time and only change 1 or 2, right? So with the Vanished Days, because I was doing dual time, I kept the dual time. I put it all in the past, but I kept the dual time. But I was already changing that one element. There was no modern day element. And then there was just no place for a supernatural element. It just wouldn't fit. There was nowhere to put it. There's a lot of times that I use the supernatural element.
Actually, I agree with you.
Yeah, it would have been too busy. Their heads would have exploded because they were already trying to get so much history in there. Just couldn't do it, right? So, but this one, which is also dual time, this one is called The King's Messenger. It started life as The Lesser Stars, and then my publishers went, it started life as The King's Messenger was my original working title. And then I read a poem called The Lesser Stars that I really liked. And I'm like, ooh, I could use that because it fit the theme. And then we've gone back to The King's Messenger now because it's like a strong, normal title. And I'm quite happy with it. It stars a King's Messenger, works for me. It's fine. Keep the publishers happy. So it's set in 1603 1603 is the year I'm in today. See, this is why I need the big cup of coffee. It's set in 1613 in the reign of another James, just to confuse everybody, King James VI of Scotland, first of England, the king that came in after Queen Elizabeth I had died. Mary Queen of Scots, his son.
Oh, okay.
Just to completely confuse everyone. That is the Jacobean.
When you said that.
The Jacobean period, yeah. So the time of Shakespeare, time of Ben Jonson, time of all those, the Globe Theatre, all that type of stuff. He had an elder son, who nobody ever really recognized, Henry, who was the golden boy, the prince that everybody loved, the Prince of Wales, who everybody really kind of liked him better than James. He was he died when he was 18 under mysterious circumstances. And because he died, Charles I then became king later on. And, because Charles I then became king, you had the civil wars and everything. But Henry was something else. Henry's right-hand man, his most intimate servant from the time he was really 4 or 5 years old, was Sir David Murray, who was an Abergavenny Murray, one of the forebears of my Abergavenny Murrays. And so and he was a poet. Murray was a poet and just an all-around really neat guy. And I just love the relationship between the two of them through Henry's life, plus the intrigue that was going on at court at the time, plus Henry's relationship with his mother, Queen Anna, who also doesn't get a very fair airing in the history books that I think she needs. So I'm writing in the spring and summer after Henry has died or been killed, if you're me. And James has sent one of his messengers, a king's messenger, north to Scotland to bring back David Murray down to London for questioning. And David isn't so keen on coming. So it's sort of this little battle of wits between David and the king's messenger all the way down. And the messenger has a scribe assigned to him, and the scribe has a daughter, and the daughter and Andrew don't get along. Andrew is the messenger. So it's this little road trip of misfits on their way down from Scotland to London, down the Great Northern Road on horseback. But Andrew is, just because in my world nobody is nobody, Andrew is an ancestor of Robbie from the Shadow of Horses. So Andrew has the second sight. So you do get the paranormal in this. Okay. He's got like classic Scottish second sight, which comes in and out of the story at inopportune moments. So it's kind of, and you're getting both Andrew's point of view and Phoebe's point of view and David Murray's point of view as he remembers incidents with Henry. So it's a bit of a mystery, enemies to lovers road trip, all kind of,
Love it.
So it's a lot of fun. So the King's Messenger, I have to hand it in 30th of September. They've been really kind. They've already extended, from previously it was supposed to be in earlier. So this is my end of deadline.
Well, and then you'll just finish it and you'll be off to Surrey.
Yeah, for relaxation. And then it'll be on shelves in the UK. I think they're aiming for August of 2024.
Okay.
And I think in Canada and the States, it'll be probably like maybe fall 2024 or spring 2025. I don't know.
We can be UK shelf buddies.
You can be shelf buddies. Oh, was yours coming out in 2024?
UK, I know. Well, I know now is August of next
year.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know Canada and the US yet for sure.
That's so cool. Well, we can do a thing together.
That would be awesome.
That would be so fun.
Okay, but beyond that, when we have a guest on, we like to wind up with asking what you're reading right now and or the last book you read and loved. Okay, so what I'm reading right now. Every single one of these stinking books on the shelf behind me, because that's my research reading. But I am preparing to read. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, The Forgotten Shore by Sarah May.
I've seen that cover before.
That's a beautiful cover.
It's a beautiful cover. I have seen someone else just sharing that, I think, on Instagram.
Really? So Sarah Main and I were supposed to do an event together in Glasgow. I don't think it was a couple of years ago, and it got canceled. And she's just a lovely person. She's got Canadian ties as well. And this Forgotten Shore is a dual time that goes between Western Scotland and Newfoundland. and I'm just really interested to read that. It's on my like TBR pile for I can't read when I'm writing, so it's on. But her last book was that.
Oh, another pretty cover.
Isn't it pretty?
Yeah, it is. She's gotten some good covers.
Okay. All right, so jotting down.
Okay. Actually, if I move it further away, you can see it. The Awakening. And then tangentially, historically, I am also reading just reading and admiring and looking at and stroking this little book by this is Jeannie Lynn's book.
Oh, we love Jeannie Lynn.
Isn't that Jeannie Lynn? So she did a Kickstarter for this the Year of the Cap, because so I haven't had a chance to actually look, but the artwork in this is just absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
It is.
So beautiful. So isn't that beautiful? So
we saw Jeannie at the Historical Novel Society conference.
I love Jeannie too. I love Jeannie too. Jeannie was one of the first people that I ran into, Jeannie and Amanda I ran into, oh my gosh. I can't even remember. They would probably remember years and years and years ago I don't even know where it was. It was somewhere in California. They would remember, and I don't remember. It was at a conference we were all at in California.
Probably at RWA, maybe in Anaheim.
It might have been, but I think it was before Anaheim even. I think it was, I can't even remember where it was, but ages ago. You know how you always have those people that you run into?
She's your conference person.
The conference people, yeah. It was Jeannie and Amanda, and we just, so, yeah.
Well, now I'm singing the Al Stewart song in my head, so thanks. And
that's not a bad earworm. If you have an earworm, that's not a bad one.
That's not a bad one. So
if people have never read Jeannie's historical romance novels,
they're very good.
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous writing, and really, really well researched, and really, really nice stories, and
really out of the norm, which is
just
people who are sick of reading the same old. That's a good place to go.
Yeah,
I remember when Butterfly Swords first came out. Her first.
I do too. I remember when she won the unpublished Rita?
Golden Heart.
The Golden Heart.
Golden Heart. Yep.
She looks so young.
But that, like I say, I have no time, unfortunately, for reading. Even usually, a lot of the time when I'm writing, I can at least read like my Harlequin Presents or something like that to get, because I can read a Harlequin Presents in about an hour and a half, right? So that's kind of like my sit back and just chill, have a cup of coffee, read one of those, and I feel like I've done something other than writing for a minute. But I can't even do that now because I'm just crazy.
I always found that sometimes when I'm getting really close to the end of a book and like I'm sort of like breathing and eating and sleeping it, after working with words all day, I don't want to do words. I don't want to do words after like.
I do the visual stuff. Like I'll just, when I'm making supper, I'll put on like, I think last weekend was like superhero weekend or something on AMC. So I'm kind of like, okay, let's do superhero weekend. Yeah. So I get like, 20 minutes of Wonder Woman or something like that. And I'm good to go, but I can't even sit and watch a whole movie, which sucks. But I know that after I hand in, then I'll be able to sit and watch like the entire Lord of the Rings extended version if I want to, right? So
there you go. And you can catch up on all your reading.
That's my thing. Yeah.
And we really do appreciate you giving us the time. If you do have a deadline of September 30th, we realize just how stressful that is. And so we appreciate you squeezing us in.
Oh, that's okay. A coffee break is always a good thing. It's always a good thing.
I know, but most people don't take an hour.
I know. We took up a whole hour of your day, so we really appreciate it.
I'm very chatty.
No, we love chatty, so don't worry about that. That's great. And I hope that everyone picks up the Vanish Days the Vanish Days. I keep wanting to call it the Vanishing Days, which is the wrong.
That's okay.
But everyone should pick it up. We were talking about the twist at the end. But the character, especially Adam, actually both characters,
I like
Adam and Lily. They're such strong characters. They're wonderful to read, and I hope people will pick it up.
Oh, I actually have. I forgot to show you. Up at I don't know if you can see her up at the top of my bookshelf there.
Yep.
That is. Oh, sorry. I always get my hand wrong. There. That is Dolly. That is the.
Oh, nice.
I had a doll maker make me a reproduction doll of when you read The Vanished Days, you'll know who that is.
Really? Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet.
She features in the book.
And I like how that was twisted. That all came in together too.
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed the book a lot. So.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm really glad.
Letting us read it. Yeah. And that we will be back. Donna and I will be back next Tuesday, despite the fact that we also have September 30th deadlines, and we will. Ours are a little more flexible.
Is that your deadline face, Donna?
Sure. I'm really behind my deadline face. Yeah. But we're going to be talking about dialogue. So we're really looking forward to that. It's our finishing up our year. We've been doing a year-long writing room segment where we've been talking about the different segments of writing. We're getting towards the end of people writing their novels. That'll be Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep.
And if you enjoyed our show, please remember to subscribe either on our YouTube channel, which is at Stepintothestory Books, or join our community, which we would love to have, because then you can chat with us at facebook.com/groups/stepintothestory. Thanks again, Susanna Kearsley. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks for coming, Susanna.
Thank you. Bye-bye.